Lord, let your light from your face shine on us. Lord, let your light from your face shine on us, that we may be saved, that we may have life to find our way in the darkest night. Let your light shine on us.
Lord, let your grace from your hand fall on us.
Lord, let your grace from your hand fall on us, that we may be saved, that we may have life to find our way in the darkest night. Let your grace fall on us. Lord, let your love with no end, come over us. Lord, let your love with no end, come over us, that we may be saved, that we may have life to find our way in the darkest night. Let your love come over us.
Let your grace fall on us.
Let your light shine on us.
And now a reading from the Gospel of Matthew. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. The word of God for the people of God.
Thank you, Blair. So I want you to imagine you are in Jesus' presence when this particular part of the sermon took place. So this is part of a larger context of a story. Jesus has been in ministry. This is part of his relatively early years in ministry. He's been preaching throughout his home region, the region of Galilee. People are starting to catch on, gain a little momentum. He's called some disciples now to be his followers. He is leading people who are following him, and he is doing regular teachings and preachings in public places. One of the things that has happened is that the word about what he is doing is starting to spread, and so more and more people are gathering. Every time he stops, every time he is giving a lesson, every time he does a talk of some kind, more people have gathered. And so there's a crowd that's building up, and he's set to do some more teaching. And so he takes them to this area that he would have known quite well, to the shores of the Sea of Galilee, and he walks up the hillside, and there's a natural amphitheater there, and people are standing, they're sitting, they're laid out. They're there to listen and to learn from Jesus. And he begins what's known in the church today as the Sermon on the Mount. And it begins with a particular set of phrases that are called the Beatitudes. And many of you are familiar with these. They are the blessed are those who. They start off, there's several of them. He says things like, blessed are those who mourn, and they will be comforted. Blessed are those who thirst for justice. Blessed are those who are meek, for they will inherit the earth. And he goes on to list a whole series of blessed are you who's. And in all likelihood, the people recognize that Jesus is actually speaking to them. See, everything we know about Jesus' ministry is that it is different than one might expect for someone in his position. If you are seeking to try to reach a lot of people, to communicate to the masses, you have a message that needs to be heard, an urgent mission, and time is of the essence. You would go to the governors, you would go to the kings, you would go to the emperor, you would go to the rabbis and to the synagogues and share this message where you could communicate it to the masses. But Jesus is not concerned with getting it to the heads of state. Jesus is interested in getting it into the hands and the heads and the minds of the people on the ground, the average people, the everyday Joes and Janes of this earth. So Jesus preaches in public. He goes to where the people are, and he sits down with them out in nature, and he preaches to them this message, and he tells them that most of them, who are of low kind of stature within the community, you are blessed. It's you I'm preaching this message to. God is concerned about you and your well-being. And the things that you are doing, the least, the lost, the marginalized, you matter to God. And so people are receiving this, and they're excited about this message because nobody's ever talked to them in this way before. Nobody's ever told them that they matter. Nobody's ever told them that they bear some significance in this world, and nobody has ever told them that they are favored in God's presence. Not only that, they are blessed, and they will receive a reward because of who they are. This revolutionary kind of thinking and speaking that Jesus is doing. And I got to imagine that people are hanging on every word. They're excited about this. This is life-giving to them. And Jesus finishes all the blessed are those whose statements. And then he does a 180. And he says, you are salt. You are the salt of the earth. He says, you are the light of the world. But here's the 180 part. A city on a hill must be visible. Nobody is crazy enough to light a lamp, burn that oil, and then put a basket over the top to block out all the light. You get a light, you light it up, you put it on the table in the middle of the room where it can illuminate everything and everybody can see what's going on. That is the point of the light. The point of the light is not to contain the light for itself, to stifle it from everybody else's view. The city on the hill is meant to be a beacon. People are drawn to it. It's not meant to be hidden and covered up. And so Jesus says this. Jesus understands people. And this is already a warning to them. You are blessed, but it's not for you to hoard. You are favored, but it's not meant for you to contain. God is a God not of scarcity, but abundance. And if you are receiving the blessing, like light, it's up to you to shine, to show it, to share it. I get so frustrated with the Christians who think that if they just believe the right things, if they subscribe to the right beliefs, if they say the right things, if they're a part of the right circles, then it's just a matter of waiting on out the rest of this life so that they can claim their reward someday. But that's absolutely contrary to Jesus' teaching. Yes, you're blessed. Yes, you're favored. Yes, God is radiating life and love and grace throughout you. But it is not up to you to just hold on to that and contain it. It has to be shared. Jesus' message is equally relevant to us. The church today is very much at risk, as it always has been throughout the ages, of being a collection of people who believe the right things, who gather together, who support one another and lift one another up, and that's very good and important, but then don't do a good job of sharing the light. And it becomes about an acquisition rather than about something that we are a part of greater than ourselves. It becomes a club and not a movement. So I think Jesus was incredibly wise by saying, yes, you are blessed, and you have a responsibility. This week and several times already in 2018, people from this congregation have asked, so what's your vision for the church? What's your vision for Mountain Chapel? And it's an interesting question, because I don't think it's about my vision. It's about what God's vision is. And I think that we as a church have some work to do. And I have some leadership work to do in terms of what are the steps that we are going to do to lead us to the vision. But a vision is about a result. A mission statement is about how you get to your result, but the vision is the result. And here's the vision for the church as I understand it that God has set out through Jesus Christ. Change lives, change communities, change the world. Change lives, change communities, change the world in the name of Jesus Christ. That's the goal. That's the goal. If Jesus said, know the right stuff and bide your time until the end of days, that would be one thing, but he didn't. He said, do ministry, be in relationship, go out into the world, be light. Change lives, change communities, change the world. So how do we get there? That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the church has its work to do. That's where we have to take up our own responsibility and collectively what we share as the church about how we're going to do that. Now, the church throughout the ages has come up with a number of ways to do this. And for most of my life, I really felt like it has boiled down to three things. And so, we're going to use a visual aid today. And this is going to get some of you who are pretty comfortable in the back row to move forward. No, I'm just kidding. I sit in the back row when I visit churches, I understand. So this starts with one of the key things that I think many of us learn about the church, and that is one of the church's primary jobs is to be in mission. All right, choir, it says mission. All right, so mission, of course, you understand what this means. It means the way that we reach out to our community. It means the way that we care for others. It means that we're doing things, right? We're getting our hands dirty. It's not a mental exercise necessarily. It's about going and doing and being the church, right? And then there's another one that's fairly obvious to us, and that is worship, right? So we got mission and worship. Mission and worship, key things. Now, there's another one that many of you engage in on a regular basis. You just came from Sunday school. You're a part of Bible studies. You're a part of small groups. You're a part of book clubs, and so forth, circles. That's the growth piece, right? It's not just a matter of, okay, once I got through confirmation, then I just sort of checked out. You don't graduate from spiritual development and growth, ever. We're lifelong learners in the faith. So I would call this, we could just call this growth. All right, choir, it says mission, worship, growth. Now, through much of the church's history, what we did is that we said, there's a way that you do this. The first way that you do this is if you come into the church as a new person or somebody that's exploring Christianity, you come in through worship, right? You get invited to worship, or you check out the neighborhood church. There's something that's compelling there. Maybe it was an event that the church put on. Anyway, it draws you in, and you worship. And after you worship for a while, you get to know some of the people, and then you're comfortable checking out a Bible study, and so you do the growth piece. Some pastors I've heard talk about this in terms of like, this is first base, worship, growth or spiritual nourishment is second base, and then you get to mission. But the thing that we know about the church today, and we know about emerging generations, is that they are not eager to go first, second, third base. They do it in any order that makes sense to them. So let's say that you have a brand new person who's interested in this Jesus guy, but they don't know much about him. They might be happy to go on our Costa Rica trip and serve people because they're interested in the service piece. They want to do something with their life. They want to help their fellow neighbor, right? So that's the way that they come in. But in the past, we'd say, well, you can't do it that way. That's backwards. But that's the way it's happening today in many cases. Or somebody comes and participates in a mom's circle group at the church. And they get to know a group of women. And then that group of women says, hey, you should come and join us for a mission event. And all of a sudden now we're stuffing the bus with diapers. And then later on they say, well, you should really come and check out worship. That's an enriching part of our lives too. And so they do that. And so these are the things, whatever order we put them in, that the church has been about for generations. We've said that these are key components to being who we need to be as Christian people. Now, I would argue that the church has neglected a critical fourth item on here for much of its history, especially in our mainline Protestant denominations. And that is sharing. This is what we would call anything like faith sharing, evangelism, getting the news out, right? And we haven't talked about this much because this is the part that makes us the most uncomfortable. Because most of us don't feel equipped to be good at sharing our faith. We say, that's not a comfortable topic for a lot of people. We don't talk about sex and money and our own religion, right? But the truth of the matter is, think again about the gospel lesson that you just heard Blair read. Blessed are you, but you have a responsibility to be light, to be a city on a hill, to share that light and let it shine out. That's why the sharing piece is absolutely critical. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a bullhorn on a street corner. What it means is that maybe it's an invitation to a mission, worship, or growth event. Maybe it's as simple as inviting somebody to attend worship with you and taking them out for breakfast afterwards. Maybe it's as simple as sharing something that you read in a Bible study that you thought might lift somebody up during a difficult time. It's those kinds of things that happen very naturally, very organically, that are the ways that we most effectively do evangelism in the 21st century. Now here's what I propose. We rename these. What if mission we renamed serve? And what if we said worship is synonymous with adoration? We're adoring God, praising God, worshiping God. And so we serve, we adore. Growth, we could learn. Serve, adore, learn, and instead of sharing, we say tell. Salt. Serving, adoring, learning, telling. S-A-L-T. Jesus says, you are salt. Okay, first century Jesus, what do you mean by you are salt? Salt is one of those things that comes up in the Bible and has so many connotations with it. Salt is used, of course, for preservation. It's used in sacrifice. It's used for covenant. It's used at breaking of bread. And it's synonymous with all of these kinds of different things and promises. So when Jesus says you are salt, it calls to mind all of these things for people in Jesus' time. And then he says, you need to be salt and don't lose the saltiness. He says if salt loses its taste, it's gravel, right? It's sand. It's nothing. You toss it out, you walk on it. It's no good anymore. Here's what I learned about salt this week in researching for this sermon. In terms of chemistry, salt doesn't lose its saltiness. Nothing happens that causes salt to transform into being unsalty anymore. The way salt loses its saltiness is when other impurities get entered in. In other words, when it becomes diluted too much and it's no longer salty. So here's why I'm bringing this up. Because I think that these things, serve, adore, learn, and tell, are at the core of what we should be about as Christians. And when we start to leave any of these things off, or when we start to add too many other outside things, it dilutes it. That's where we lose our saltiness. And so, if you're looking for a framework, if you're looking for, in this new year, for a new beginning, and you want something to keep yourself in balance as a healthy Christian, I would encourage you to remember Jesus' call on your life when he says, you are salt. And if you're like me, an acronym might help with that. I don't like schlocky acronyms as much as anybody else. But I do need, in my own life, something to keep me in check. And when we make sure that serving others, worshiping God, being a lifelong learner in spiritual growth, and never forgetting to share the good news that we have received, we're going to be on point for being what God says through Jesus when we are called salt. Will you pray with me? God, so many of us are looking for direction, or we feel like this task of being a lifelong disciple seems daunting, or maybe even overwhelming. But you don't ask us to go out and change a life, or change a community, or change the world unequipped. Through Jesus, you have told us that we are salt. We are light. We are meant to be people who share. Help us to have such an infectious kind of faith, joy in our hearts and grace in our lives that we can't help but share this message. Help us to be light. Help us to be salt. Help us to be true disciples that walk in the way that leads to light and life. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.